It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor, actually. And I always like to start my presentations with sort of a story that, it's touching on a little bit of reality and emotion. And I want to start with one number, and that is 12 million. 12 million people are currently being misdiagnosed each year in the United States of America. And that's according to a recent publication done at the British Journal of Medicine in 2014 that was then validated again in 2016 by the University of Houston, Texas. It means that 1 out of 20 people that seeks medical attention in the United States, statistically speaking, may walk away with the wrong diagnosis. But again, it's just a number, and oftentimes we talk a lot about statistics, but I want to put a face to one of those numbers. And that's the story of Amelia Portela. So Amelia, on April 2nd, 2014, experienced a headache. She had nausea and loss of appetite. She visited the family doctor and was diagnosed immediately with a common flu, sent back home with some prescription medication. However, a few days later, April 9th, experienced fever, vomiting, abdominal pain. They did a CT, but there was no conclusive findings other from calcification due to her age. And so she was then diagnosed with food poisoning. And she was again sent back home. Not too shortly after, she was coming down the stairs. She fainted, fell down, fractured her shoulder, and she was lucky enough that her son was there and took her to the nearby university hospital. Well, they did a different CT, and this time they found actually an inflamed appendix. And if you can see it right there. On April 12th, she underwent surgery to remove the appendix because she had acute appendicitis, and she recovered pretty well, and a few days later she learned how to Skype. And the reason I know that is because she's my grandma, and I was the first person she Skyped with because I was here and I wanted to know and get a status update of the operation. And I thought, wow, this is not just a number, it really touches, and it's now personal. And I thought I was done with my share of misdiagnosis, but a couple months ago, my fiance, she had extreme upper abdominal pain as well. She was driving, almost had a car crash. I had to pick her up in the middle of the highway in Northern California where we live. We took her to the hospital, El Camino Hospital in Mountain View, California, and then she was there diagnosed with gastritis after doing blood tests, x-ray, and a series of other questions. Of course, the symptoms didn't go away, even though she was prescribed Nexium, the purple pill to sort of treat gastritis. She again she had another panic attack, and she again almost had an accident when she was coming down the stairs as well at home. And so therefore, we took her to a different hospital, Stanford Health, and there they basically thought she might have kidney stones. But the symptoms didn't quite fit the typical symptoms that she was feeling on the abdomen. So we actually did an ultrasound scan at Siemens, where I work, and then we immediately identified up to 20 different stones in the gallbladder. She actually had gallstones. So she went back to the doctor at Stanford Health, and then eventually, after looking at the medical images, of course she couldn't diagnose based on medical images done at the Siemens facility, she went and did another ultrasound scan that truly confirmed that she had gallstones. She then had to remove and do a laparoscopy surgery and remove the gallbladder. And now she's fine. But again, another example of she was misdiagnosed twice in a period of 2 weeks. But she was one of the lucky ones, because if you keep reading into the reports, a report published last year actually shows that there's a total of 250,000 people that die each year as a result of medical errors. 250,000 people. That's more than the people that died on the same year of HIV or AIDS, more than the people that die of car crashes, of gun-related deaths, and breast and prostate cancer combined. In fact, if you add them all up, it's still below 250K. It's how many people are actually dying. But again, it's just a number, just a statistic. Let's put a face to one of those numbers again. This is William Linton, 85 years old, Canadian citizen. And on January 19th, experienced shortness of breath, stayed overnight at the hospital for observation. He was then he received a CT scan, and then they found a sizable tumor in his right lung. And he got the worst news possible, which is it's not resectable, it's inoperable. So they sent him back home to prepare for chemotherapy. However, a few days later, he actually couldn't breathe and couldn't even move, and that's not typical of the symptoms of having a large-sized tumor in the right lung. So he came back, did a bronchoscopy, and instead, they actually found that he had a garden pea in his right lung, and actually was experiencing symptoms of pneumonia. So he actually did not have a large, sizable tumor in his right lung. He had a garden pea. Unfortunately for his family, He actually was diagnosed with pneumonia too late. He ended up dying the following day from a very treatable disease. But like him, in the past 2 years, several other people have died as a result of misdiagnosis that led to medical errors in prescription and diagnosis. So it is a problem, and when we look at this report, the Institute of Medicine, entitled to Err is Human, you'll find that some of the reasons why there's a lot of medical errors are related in the patient care or the patient spectrum of care, or the care continuum, and it's mostly largely related to diagnostic, the first diagnosis, and then the treatment. And when we look into it, we realize there's a lot of challenges that clinicians face today and institutions as mostly driven by the trends in healthcare. There are three main ones that truly are becoming significant for us as medical device companies, which is consolidation of these sort of like enterprises, like the large integrated delivery networks. We have industrialization, doing more with less resources and less budget. And of course, value-based healthcare, moving away from pay-per-service to pay-per-episode of care. And this is significant because this truly adds a lot of pressure to clinicians and makes them, of course, when you are under pressure, you have what it's called and scientifically as selective focus. And Harvard actually did a study which was very interesting, and they basically took a series of radiologists and then they put this image in front of them and they asked them to find a tumor. And of course, radiologists were always trying to find a tumor, but they couldn't really spot anything outrageous. So at the end, and you probably can't see it because of the projector, so let me zoom in, they were asked the question, did you spot the monkey? And if you look over there, there's a gorilla that was put there on purpose. And the results are actually astonishing. 24 radiologists reviewed the images, 83% did not see the monkey. And that's because, again, selective focus, very, very, very focused on trying to find the minuscule lesions that you're used to finding. But again, it goes back to having that, constant pressure to diagnose quick and ensuring that, you see more patients because you need to address some of those challenges that you see in the healthcare trends today. So that leads really to a major initiative from Siemens, which is how can we help them sort of enable better outcomes while at the same time empower them to become more efficient and effective in lowering the total cost of operations. So we did a big survey with a lot of administrators at IDNs, and basically we asked them what are the top challenges you face today so that we can readjust our messaging and our positioning in the market. And we basically categorized those into top 10 categories of pain points, and you can see here. And if you look through them, there's actually not one single category that talks about technology, talks about resolution, talks about image contrast, talks about dose, which is typically this sort of the messaging that you have seen with General Electric, Philips, because being pioneers is not the same as being innovators, and we need to innovate. We need to help innovate practice. And oftentimes these two terms are sort of put together and they're not the same. And we all know this from the general basic consumer industry. We know that Apple, for example, is known as an innovator, not necessarily as a pioneer, because they didn't develop the first MP3 player or computer or many other devices. You know the same thing from Google. They were not the first search engine, but they innovated the market. And then, of course, we know the same thing from Facebook, not the first social media website, but certainly innovated the market. And I mentioned these three because these are the number one, number two most valuable companies, and then Facebook number 5 most valuable companies. And I work near all three. In Silicon Valley, that's why I wanted to mention these three. But one example that to me really stood out is one example used by Seth Godin, a marketing guru. And it's a story of the expression, the greatest thing since sliced bread. And to me, it's one of the best examples why oftentimes we as medical device companies, we need to think beyond being the first to market, beyond technology, and actually think more in terms of solving customer problems. And this is the example of sliced bread. So this is a person called Otto Rehweder, and he's a German descent immigrant that came to the United States, and he developed a patent to precisely slice bread. Actually was able to did a series of clinical trials, or not clinical trials, but technical trials, and he filed for a patent, and he was the first one to develop the prototype, and he went on a series of trade shows and road shows. But yet, for the first 15 years, nobody bought the idea of sliced bread. Not one single machine. It was only until later that a company called Wonder in the 1930s saw the opportunity, but before they actually invested in it, they basically decided to look into the market, segment the market, and understand the pain points of each individual segment that they identified, and then develop the channels, develop the right pricing, the right strategy, and the right marketing. Some of the marketing is actually pretty creative. Of course, for the bakeries, they basically said delivery out on time, fresh bread every day, so you can save on costs. For the supermarkets, they basically said you can compete with the bakeries because we deliver fresh bread every day, so as fresh as the bakeries, 6 hours fresher than ever before. That was their marketing claim. But then they got really creative with the consumers and with the mothers and the households, which was about 70% of the total market for bread. And they made some strong claims, such as sliced bread builds bodies stronger in 8 different ways. And in fact, they actually even specified all 8 different ways, and they say basically sliced bread will help build better muscles, bones and teeth, and blood cells, etc. Clearly, FDA wasn't regulating as they should back then. But it was so successful that the next year they released another one called 12 different ways. They went from 8 to 12 different ways that can actually improve health of consumers. And then eventually they took it a step further. I think it's quite a bit of a stretch, but they said women can actually look more attractive if they eat sliced bread. So there's true commercials. But the point here is, regardless of whether or not they actually pushed the envelope on the marketing, they truly made sliced bread a successful product. And today, it's one of the most popular products sold in supermarkets, according to Forbes. So it's another example why sometimes you can be the pioneer, you can be the technology, the scientist and have all the evidence, but if you don't know how to take a product to market and truly address the needs of that market, you will fail. And what I'm going to show you today is some examples of what we've done. We looked into our brand. How can we change our brand? And you probably heard that, we've changed the positioning from Siemens Medical Solutions to Siemens Health and Ears in the United States. There's a reason for that name. I wasn't necessarily involved with that name. I'll be glad to talk about it afterwards, but that's not the point of this presentation. I'm going to talk mostly about the businesses that I'm responsible for and was responsible for in the past. But I'm also going to talk about native marketing. So this is a term that we use internally, and this is how we would like to do sort of value-based marketing. And sales playbook, and then, of course, disruptive positioning. So we outlined a map, and we outlined where we currently have messagings, and that's where you see sort of like the gaps and sort of the road for us. And our road for us is now sort of the vision is how can we become perceived in the market as a trusted partner as opposed to someone who just wants to sell medical devices. And so that's where we started off with native marketing. And here we develop a go-to-market strategy, and it's a template that we use. And at a high level, basically, before we decide to launch any product or solution, we have to follow this very detailed plan. These are sort of the high-level categories: segment to market, value proposition, product positioning, business plan, product launching, product and post-launch activities. It's actually a very detailed plan. If you would look at it, it's over almost 80 different slides, and with the framework established for you to provide the relevant content. But I'm not going to spend too much time on these slides. What I am going to emphasize is the way we actually work with customers to ensure that throughout the whole sort of go-to-market plan and strategy that we have sort of positioned ourselves as the customer sort of partner and someone who wants to solve their current problems and challenges. And what was also established in the company was that before we even start filling out the template, we have to do something what we call the Premortem. And the Premortem is basically something that was created many years ago for surgeons, and when they wanted to go in and sort of do a surgery to a specific patient, they did a Premortem to identify every single thing that could go wrong with the surgery so that they can plan accordingly and mitigate any potential fallouts. Normally at companies, we are used to doing a Postmortem. After we launch the product, let's get together and review what went wrong with the product. So here we decided to take a different approach. Let's do a Premortem. And one of my professors back when I was in college was Professor Babashev. Basically, we contracted him to be the consultant for us, and he basically became the facilitator for us to organize this exercise. And what we did is we selected from multiple departments within Siemens, 2 people, one with a lot of experience, one with less experience, in all departments, including even the administration and human resources were involved. And basically we separated this sort of group into 2 different scenarios. One group was scenario A, which is a negative outlook. Imagine we have a project X, which is the project that we're going to develop a go-to-market strategy. And this is sort of the headline of the news. And you have to fill out the body of the text. And basically, Siemens Health and your stock plummets. After sales of project X falls short of expectations. Now, please provide us the explanation that justifies why this happened. And then we did the same thing, but the other way around, sort of health and year stock soars. Please provide an explanation of why this happened. And then the results were fascinating. We had people that really got into it. We said there's no limits how much you can write, but we got myriad of results from, Trump administration to war with Korea, because we do have factories in Korea. And it came to a point where there's a lot of things outlined, even by people that are not related to the product or to marketing, that we haven't thought of. And we created a task force that then will eventually, which is Project X is still ongoing, will eventually sort of mitigate for every potential fallout in the product. So a very successful exercise that then helped us build that go-to-market strategy and that template. And then the value proposition, we normally follow this template, which is basic, and I think every other company follows the same, which is start with the pain points, describe the challenge, quantify that challenge, and then how does your solution address the challenge, and of course, eventually, what is the benefit from a clinical, operational, financial perspective. So here's an example of what we've done. So for one of the products we launched was a SPECT CT product. So it's a hybrid nuclear medicine system with a CT, 16-slice CT. And what we decided to do is, before we launched the product, we actually had almost no evidence generated almost at the time of launch. So we decided to invest quite a significant amount of marketing dollars and collaborate with 5 institutions, MD Anderson, Johns Hopkins, University of Erlangen, Minnesota, and Munich in Germany. And basically, we did a series of qualitative analysis. We imaged 76 patients, and each patient had a series of lesions, totaling a total of 2,052 lesions. And we asked a very simple question, because obviously to do a cohort study will require a lot of years and will require a lot of scanning. We just asked qualitative data that we could use to sort of formulate enough validation to sort of support our messaging that we are addressing customer problems. And so the 2 questions was, can I see the lesion? And if you can see it, or can I detect it, can you characterize it? So it's basically sensitivity and specificity, but asked in sort of a marketing term. And the results were that by doing a blind study, looking at the conventional system, which I won't mention here, and then looking at our system, again, on a different day, but the same patient, they were able to more confidently detect and more confidently diagnose cancer. And so then we developed a tagline together with our clinicians, which was the difference between seeing and knowing. But with this information, just qualitative information, we're able to generate a series of scientific posters, and all published at RSNA and the sort of European Conference of Nuclear Medicine. And with this information, we're able to generate a lot of awareness and then create that marketing value that we needed in the beginning, which is working with customers to address specifically their challenges. So you will see no mention of resolution, no mention of improved sensitivity or improved specificity, because the goal was really to sort of adapt our messaging to sort of talk more along the lines of you're having problems to distinguish lesions, and here's how we can help based on a series of not cohort studies, but selective studies that we've done. We've done the same thing for ultrasound, where we actually took a system that we had, and we basically spent a couple $1 million and invited 395 ultrasound users worldwide. And we did 170 workshop sessions over a period of a year and a half. And with those workshops, we were able to completely redesign the whole system based only on the user input. So this new product that was introduced a few months back, it's completely designed around sort of how the customers were using the ultrasound and exactly how they would like to see the buttons placed, what kind of sort of keys they would like to see in the touch panel, and sort of even the layout, how you lift and raise the sort of the control panel up and down. So everything was designed exactly from that feedback, which then, of course, the tagline became designed by you for you. And to validate it, what we did is we hired a third-party company called Macadamia Studies. And what we did is we sort of bought a couple competitor systems, and we gave this third-party company our system plus the competitor systems, and they basically brought in a total of 20-plus sonographers to come in and do the same tasks on these systems. So if you were a vendor A user, you would come in and use vendor B and C. If you are a vendor B, you do A and C, so that you're not biased. And then you measure the success completion of those tasks, but also the time and how easy of use it was to do. And clearly Siemens there stood out very high 83% versus the competitors in terms of ease of use and friendliness. So this is a very powerful study that we did. Again, it goes back to that original survey where if you actually put side by side, Siemens tends to outperform, but it wasn't clear because there was no clear validation. We only truly found out from empirical data by interviewing 93 users. So now we have data that we can actually use and sort of promote the usability of the product. In terms of sales playbook, we usually, in ultrasound, I always compare MR or CT to basically when you're going through the process of acquiring one of those products, you're looking at buying a house, but then when you do ultrasound, you're looking at buying a car. You actually want to test drive it. And so we have this motto, which is you'll never have a second chance to make a good first impression. So we developed a series of playbook items to help them do that, and one of them was this selective tool where you actually have comparative images on the same patient with their system and our images. And what you could do is you can actually put them side by side, and then you can scroll left to right, same patient, same acquisition, but different products. And you can demonstrate the value of one product over the other using exactly their technology. And we also did it for ultrasound, which is basically a demo playbook, where you have a series of products. You can pick your user, and then the amount of time you have to pitch to that user, and then you'll have either a product presentation or a live demonstration done by the best demonstrators in the field that we brought in, and you'll have a script. And so this is basically an example of you can see on your phone, on your tablet. You can download it even as a podcast, and you can listen to in the car as you drive towards your customers to do your pitch. So a series of sales tools that we developed. But finally, just to finalize, and I know I'm running out of time, I just wanted to basically talk a little bit about disruptive positioning, something that we spent quite a bit of time on. In 2014, we launched the world's first Alzheimer's disease biomarker imaging solution to image sort of amyloid plaques in the brain. And this was a PET-CT scanner. And so what we did in order to excite the market at a trade show at RSNA, we brought in this author called Lisa Genova. She's a Harvard author, and she wrote the book called Still Alice about the experience of someone going through Alzheimer's disease. Now, this was 2012 when we did it, actually. So correction, I said 2014 before. 2012 we did this, and then a few years later it actually became a movie. We had no idea it was going to become a movie, and then it became an Oscar-nominated movie. So she actually won the Oscar for Best Actress. But with this, at the RSNA, we also took the opportunity to sort of guide them through our booth and excite them. And what we did is if you go at that booth, you'll find that it's a bit chaotic, a lot of vendors, a lot of messages. So how can you actually stand out? What we did is we went to Hollywood and we hired an agency to develop a big, real-life size sort of human that would have experienced Alzheimer's disease. And his name is Jill. And basically, this company, they did work for Iron Man, Terminator, X-Men, and a series of other popular sort of movies in Hollywood. And so they basically did this for us. And this is a real life size sort of head. And it will interact with you as you pass by the booth. The head will interact with you. It will recognize you, but then you walk by again, and it will look confused. And sort of giving you an onset of Alzheimer's disease. And in the back of the brain, it will be cut out. So you can actually see the amyloid plaques forming in the brain together with tau protein. So it was a success. We got a lot of traction at the booth. We got a lot of social media attention. And the booth was more populated than ever. In fact, that very same year, we got more leads for that particular product than any other product we've ever had in the past. But we did a similar thing for nuclear medicine where we had a real-size human but cut in half. And then basically for this product, we wanted to demonstrate the ability to truly diagnose sort of cancer easier on the bone, especially the spine. And so what we did is we had the humanoid, as we call it, at the booth. And you can come by and you can see the spine, and you can see a series of metastases, vertebral metastases. And you can see a conventional method of scanning versus the new method that we introduced. And you can then sort of play with it and make the call, can you spot the lesions? It was, again, very successful, and I would have shown you the images, but I think the presentation now crashed. But all in all these initiatives is just the first step towards positioning us as, becoming that closer to sort of the customer problems that we face, changing our messaging from technology, from resolution sensitivity, more along the lines of we're solving customer problems. And we have a whole new initiative towards positioning even the brand Healthineers as sort of becoming that sort of people-oriented and customer-oriented company. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, but basically, so far, we believe this has been successful to turn around sort of our perception in the market, And I think if you actually follow some of these principles, you can really make your product, the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Uh-huh.
So, thank you.